Imagine the tactical operations centered deep inside Andersen Air Force Base on the island territory of Guam. It is the undisputed crown jewel of American power projection in the Indo-Pacific. The flight line outside is packed wingtip to wingtip with billions of dollars of aviation supremacy. B-52 Stratofortresses, B-1B Lancers and KC-135 refueling tankers. For decades, this tiny, isolated island served as the untouchable sanctuary from which the United States could dominate the hemisphere. But the geopolitical temperature has reached the boiling point, and the sanctuary is an illusion. Suddenly, the early warning sirens shatter the tropical night. The radar operators staring at their screens do not see a single rogue aircraft approaching. They see a swarm of high-altitude, hypersonic contacts plunging down from the exosphere. They are looking at a coordinated saturation barrage of DF-26 intermediate-range ballistic missiles, IRBMs, launched from deep inside the Chinese mainland. The DF-26 was not given the moniker the Guam Killer for marketing purposes. It was engineered with absolute, chilling specificity to do one thing: vaporize this exact runway. The American Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD) batteries stationed on the island open fire. The sky fills with the smoke trails of multi-million-dollar interceptors. But it is a mathematical impossibility. The sheer, overwhelming volume of incoming reentry vehicles overwhelms the defensive magazines. The defenses run dry. Seconds later, massive penetrator warheads slam into the reinforced concrete runways, churning them into jagged, impassable craters. Cluster munitions detonate over the flight line, shredding the unarmored skin of the strategic bombers. The massive, above-ground aviation fuel storage tanks erupt into towering columns of fire, turning the base into an inescapable inferno. In less than 45 minutes, the primary staging ground for the United States Air Force in the Pacific has been completely eliminated. The American military machine has been blinded, grounded, and pushed thousands of miles backward. This is not a dystopian fiction scenario. This is the baseline planning assumption for every single wargame conducted by the Pentagon in the 2020s. The United States military recognized a terrifying, unvarnished truth. If they attempt to fight a modern high-intensity war relying solely on the vulnerable megabases of the first and second island chains, they will lose. They realized that to fight an industrialized superpower across the vast, tyrannical expanse of the Pacific Ocean, they desperately needed a new sanctuary. They needed a landmass that was massive, heavily industrialized, politically rock-solid, and most importantly, securely out of range of the initial barrage. They looked 3,000 miles to the south. They looked at the continent of Australia. And in that moment, the geopolitical architecture of the free world was fundamentally rewritten. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are executing a forensic, deep-dive tactical analysis into the most critical, yet frequently misunderstood, strategic dependency of the 21st century. Here is the thesis for this episode. The United States of America is the most powerful military force in the history of human civilization. But it is geographically cursed. You cannot sustain a high-intensity, multi-domain war of attrition 6,000 miles away from your home coast without a sovereign, continental-sized logistical anchor. America cannot hold the Pacific alone. They physically, mechanically, and mathematically require the Australian mainland to survive. If you are beginning to understand why the true balance of global power is not decided by empty political rhetoric in Washington, D.C., but by the ruthless, unsentimental realities of deep-water dry docks, outback fuel bunkers, and extreme operational depth, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the patriotic illusions to bring you the cold, kinetic realities of how the free world actually builds, fights, and maintains its empire. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. For the last 70 years, the narrative has been that Australia relies on the United States for protection. That Canberra is the junior partner hiding safely under the American nuclear umbrella. In 2026, that dynamic has violently evolved into one of absolute, mutual, and desperate codependence. We are going to break down the Guam problem, the terrifying reality of the A2/AD meat grinder, and why the U.S. Air Force is abandoning its forward-deployed posture to hide its strategic bombers in the Australian Northern Territory. We are going to analyze the sustainment anvil, why a warship with a hole in its hull is a dead ship unless it has a secure, heavy industrial dry dock nearby, and how Western Australia is becoming the ultimate repair bay for the U.S. Pacific Fleet. And finally, we will explore the logistical web, the massive, highly classified fuel and munitions bunkers currently being blasted out of the Australian outback by the Pentagon, proving that fuel, not firepower, is the ultimate arbiter of victory. Let us begin by confronting the brutal mathematics of the Chinese rocket force, and why the United States had to move its starting line. The geography of vulnerability. To truly appreciate the sheer existential panic that drove the United States military to pivot its center of gravity toward the Australian continent, you must first strip away the mythology of American invincibility and look exclusively at a map measuring missile ranges. Throughout the Cold War, the United States built its Pacific strategy on a doctrine of forward deployment. They built massive, sprawling megabases on the very doorstep of their adversaries. Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan. Ozan Air Base in South Korea. And the strategic hub of Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. This forward posture worked brilliantly when the adversaries were armed primarily with short-range weapons and lacked precision-guided capabilities. The U.S. could park its multi-billion-dollar fighter squadrons and carrier strike groups directly in the adversary's face, projecting overwhelming dominance. But the Chinese Communist Party spent the last 3 decades and trillions of dollars meticulously engineering a specific countermeasure to this exact American posture. They built the Anti-Access/Area Denial (A2/AD) network. This is a layered, highly sophisticated, overlapping dome of lethality designed to push American forces so far out into the Pacific that they can no longer effectively intervene in a regional conflict. At the heart of this network is the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, PLARF. The PLARF possesses the largest, most diverse arsenal of conventional ballistic and cruise missiles on the planet. They have thousands of short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs, aimed squarely at Taiwan and Okinawa. But the true strategic terror lies in their intermediate-range ballistic missiles, IRBMs, specifically the Dongfeng 26 DF-26. The DF-26 is a road-mobile, solid-fueled ballistic missile capable of carrying a massive conventional or nuclear payload with pinpoint accuracy. It has a verified operational range of approximately 4,000 kilometers. Draw a 4,000-kilometer circle around the eastern coastline of China. You will immediately notice a catastrophic geographic reality for the Pentagon. The island of Guam, the indispensable hub of American air power and logistics in the second island chain, sits dead center inside that lethal threat ring. The Australian sanctuary. The Pentagon ran the wargames. They concluded that in the event of a high-intensity war, relying on Guam as a primary staging ground was a mathematical suicide pact. It does not matter how many Patriot or THAAD missile batteries you deploy to a tiny island. An adversary with thousands of offensive missiles will simply overwhelm the interceptors through sheer saturation mass. Once the magazines are empty, the base is annihilated. The United States Air Force realized they desperately needed a new staging ground. They needed a landmass that was massive, heavily defended, politically unbreakable, and, most importantly, located securely outside the immediate, dense engagement envelope of the vast majority of the Chinese conventional missile arsenal. They looked south, across the equator, to the rugged, sparsely populated and virtually untouchable expanse of the Australian Northern Territory. This is the strategic brilliance of the Southern Anchor. Look at RAF Base Tyndall, located over 300 kilometers inland from the coastal city of Darwin. It is approximately 4,500 to 5,000 kilometers from the Chinese mainland. That additional distance is the ultimate armor. It places Tyndall beyond the effective, reliable range of the vast majority of China's land-based conventional missile fleet. To strike Tyndall, Beijing would have to rely on a complex, highly vulnerable and extremely limited chain of long-range strategic bombers, or scarce submarine-launched cruise missiles, all of which would have to penetrate a deeply layered, highly advanced Australian over-the-horizon radar and air defense network. Recognizing this geographic salvation, the United States Department of Defense, under the U.S. Force Posture Initiatives (USFPI), began pouring hundreds of millions of dollars directly into the Australian dirt. They are radically expanding RAF Base Tyndall. They are pouring deep, military-grade concrete aprons specifically engineered to bear the massive, crushing weight of up to 6 United States Air Force B-52 Stratofortress bombers. They are building massive, hardened squadron operations facilities and subterranean intelligence bunkers. By relocating its most highly classified, destructive strategic bombers to the Australian outback, the United States is essentially moving its starting line. They are leveraging the 2,000 miles of deep-water ocean between Australia and the South China Sea as an impenetrable shield. The American bombers can launch from the untouchable sanctuary of Tyndall, fly north through uncontested, friendly Australian airspace, execute a devastating standoff strike using long-range stealth cruise missiles, and return to base without ever being exposed to a preemptive strike on the ground. Australia provides the one commodity the American empire desperately lacks in the Pacific: Strategic depth. The brutal reality of naval attrition. While the Air Force requires long runways and distance, the United States Navy requires something much heavier, dirtier, and vastly more complex to survive a Pacific war. They require heavy industry. The American public has been conditioned by Hollywood to view naval combat as a swift, decisive, and sterile affair. In reality, a high-intensity naval clash with a peer adversary like the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, will be a brutal, bloody, and agonizing war of attrition. In a war over the first island chain, American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, Ticonderoga-class cruisers, and Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines are going to take battle damage. No matter how advanced the Aegis combat system is, in a saturation environment featuring hundreds of incoming supersonic and hypersonic anti-ship missiles, some of those missiles are going to leak through the defensive perimeter. Ships will be hit. Hulls will be breached. Radar arrays will be shredded by shrapnel. This introduces the most terrifying logistical nightmare for the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. If a U.S. Navy destroyer takes a catastrophic missile hit in the Philippine Sea, but manages to stay afloat, where does it go to be repaired? It cannot go to the naval facilities in Japan or Okinawa, because those bases will likely be under continuous heavy bombardment from the Chinese rocket force. The standard peacetime operating procedure would be to tow or sail the damaged vessel back to the massive, highly capable naval shipyards in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, or even further to the shipyards in San Diego or Bremerton on the U.S. West Coast. But look at the map. The distance from the Philippine Sea to Pearl Harbor is over 4,000 nautical miles. In a war zone, attempting to tow a crippled, defenseless, multi-billion-dollar warship 4,000 miles across an ocean swarming with Chinese nuclear attack submarines and long-range maritime patrol aircraft is a literal death sentence. The ship would be hunted down and sent to the bottom long before it ever reached Hawaii. If a damaged ship cannot be repaired locally, it is effectively a dead ship. It is removed from the order of battle just as permanently as if it had been sunk. The empty, impenetrable geography of the Australian interior to hide the lifeblood of the American military. This logistical integration transforms Australia from a mere ally into an indivisible component of the American kill chain. The United States is literally burying its capacity to wage war deep within the red dirt of the Australian continent. If the balloon goes up, and the Pacific is locked down by a Chinese naval blockade, the American bombers flying out of Tyndall and the Allied fleets operating out of Perth will not starve. They will draw upon the massive prepositioned reserves of the logistical battery. They will utilize the highly secure, domestic Australian pipeline and rail networks to move that fuel exactly where it is needed, completely immune to Chinese anti-ship missiles. By turning Australia into its primary logistical reservoir, the United States guarantees that it possesses the endurance, the depth, and the fuel required to outlast the adversary in a grueling war of attrition. The end of American unilateralism. For generations, the mythology of American military supremacy was built on a narrative of unilateral dominance. The United States liked to believe that it could project power anywhere on the globe at any time, entirely on its own terms. Allies were viewed as helpful additions, providing diplomatic legitimacy and supplementary forces, but they were rarely viewed as absolute, existential prerequisites for the mechanical functioning of the American war machine. The explosive rise of the Chinese military and the terrifying geometry of the Indo-Pacific theater have violently, permanently shattered that mythology. The United States has awoken to the cold, sobering reality that it can no longer hold the line alone. The distances are too vast. The adversary's missile networks are too dense. The logistical requirements are too staggering. The indivisible theater is the new reality of global conflict. The defense of Taiwan, the security of the South China Sea, and the survival of the American Pacific Fleet are now inextricably, physically tethered to the sovereign territory of the Commonwealth of Australia. When you see a B-52 Stratofortress landing on the reinforced concrete of RAF Base Tyndall, or a Virginia-class nuclear submarine pulling into the deep-water wharves of HMAS Sterling, you are not just seeing a joint military exercise. You are looking at the physical fusion of two nations' survival strategies. Australia is no longer just America's deputy sheriff in the Pacific. We have become the southern anchor. We provide the sanctuary, the heavy industrial dry docks, the skilled nuclear workforce, and the massive subterranean fuel reserves that the United States desperately needs to stay in the fight. Without the Australian mainland, the American military presence in the Western Pacific collapses under the weight of its own logistical vulnerability and the brutal mathematics of the A2/AD meat grinder. The alliance is no longer just a piece of paper signed by politicians in Washington and Canberra. It is forged in the steel of the Henderson shipyards, buried in the fuel bunkers of the Northern Territory, and cemented by the shared realization that neither nation can survive the 21st century without the other. The United States needs the Australian mainland. And as the geopolitical temperature continues to rise, that dependency is the ultimate guarantee that the free world will hold the line. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that relying so heavily on the Australian continent is a brilliant strategic move by the Pentagon? Or does it prove that the United States is dangerously overextended in the Pacific? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay secure, and we'll see you in the next one.